Hello and welcome to the Collapse Experiment. So today, the topic is why you shouldn't marry a feminist. There's several reasons. One, green and purple hair really doesn't look good on anybody. But that tends to be an extreme form. Now there's still the, what do they call it? It's like Gen 2 or 3, where they want to be professionals, but they still want to be married, they still want to have kids, but things get a little complicated. So, years ago I knew a guy named Mike. He was married to a respiratory therapist. Now, it may sound like a good paying job, but really respiratory therapists back then, they were like 15, 16 bucks an hour. Now granted, this was about 15 years ago, but I can tell you, because I still know people that work at that hospital, really hasn't gone up much at all. So, me and Mike, we became good friends. We were hanging out quite often for like a year or two. And scheduling changes, and we started working in different areas of the hospital, and just things never lined up again after that. It kind of sucked. He was a good guy. And I remember him telling me one day about how he was feeling conflicted because he had spent 10 years pinching pennies and saving all this stuff and not buying the things that he wished he could buy, and he ended up saving something like $13,000 in his savings account. His savings account. Keep in mind, he was married, and he had a son that I worked with at the hospital, so they've been together quite a while. And then he tells me about how his wife had $12,000 to $13,000 in credit card debt, and how every time he tried to talk to her about like her spending habits and the shit that she wanted, but she couldn't really afford, there'd be a fight. She would say, "I earned it," blah blah blah, and he's like, "You can't earn something that you're not paying for." Like, putting stuff on a credit card and increasing the debt on said credit card is not earning the things that you're purchasing. But here's the thing that I noticed, and I noticed it with other people I know, is that there's a certain culture, especially in hospitals, where women are hanging out with women 8 to 12 hours per day, 5, sometimes 6 days a week. And all they ever tend to do is share notes, brag about the newest thing that they got. They'll come in wearing their real or fake, I don't even know the brand names anymore, Gucci, Prada, purse, handbag, whatever you want to call it. And they're always trying to one-up each other. And this is true for the respiratory therapist too. And it's like the different departments were competing against each other too. Like, oh, some nurse got that? Well, I can have that too. Meanwhile, the husband is being responsible, doesn't really give a crap what other people have. And in reality, this lifestyle choice to try to keep up with the Jonettes is really putting a huge burden on him. For some reason, the feminist in the relationship, the one who thinks that she can just do what she wants and that she's not part of an equation of two people working together on a goal. No, it's I'll do what I want, and he's my financial insurance, is pretty much what the guy ends up being. Because one of the things Mike said was, I could take that money that I spent all this time and effort and did all this stuff to save up, and I could pay off that debt. But that doesn't mean that she's going to stop doing what she's doing. She's still going to go out and get the $6, $7 Starbucks coffee. She's got to have the newer SUV. Because heaven forbid she has something that's older than 5 years sitting in the parking lot with all of her other coworkers' cars. You know, I hear stories about guys going out and spending crazy amounts of money, and it does happen, right? Guys do become irresponsible with money. But if there's someone who's like a really well-trained consumer, it's women. Because they're constantly trying to compete against each other. Guys, it's like, oh, that looks cool. This is a new hobby. I really want to get that game. If I had a TV slightly bigger, I could do such and such and watch the game, right? But with women, it's an everyday thing. Every day. It's, well, I gotta get my coffee. And they go to their job and they have to have their clothes in fashion for that season. Oh, these shoes are a little too scuffed up. Let me order some new ones. Which is hilarious because personally, I will never order shoes online because it's almost guaranteed they're not going to fit. So this kind of stuff happens all the time. And it's one of those things to be leery of. And, you know, I've got more that I could talk about, but might save it for another video. Thought I might keep this one shorter. But, you know, I hope that things worked out with Mike. Unfortunately, in his situation, it's like even if they split up, he was like, and this is what also pissed him off, was she would get half of the saved up money, but then he's also responsible for her debt. So he just felt like he was screwed. Like, this other person, this irresponsible person, thinks they deserve more than they're worth. Technically, yes, more than they're worth. Like, if she had earned all the stuff that she was buying and spending her money on, she wouldn't be in debt because she would have had the actual cash in order to buy and purchase those things. But that's not the situation. No, she was... And the other thing she would throw in his face is how much more she made than him. But he's the one that supported her to go to school to become a respiratory therapist. So that's just another kick in the nuts, because it's like, no, like the only reason you have that is because somebody else supported you. Meanwhile, he's trying to say, hey, this can't go on. Like, you're kind of screwing both of us over here. After he supported her, and then she's just like, no, I can do what I want. Which is completely selfish. And that's what it comes down to. That's what a lot of these stories that you see, the TikTok stories, the YouTube stories, where these women go on there and they're like, I divorced my husband of 15 years, I can never be happier. And then 2 weeks later, they're making another video of how god awful it is, and they can't seem to balance their life out, and they're in debt, and they're going to lose their apartment, and where's all the good men? You had one. But you decided to be selfish, and you thought you were still in your 20s, because for some reason, a lot of women, they just don't mature beyond a certain point. And I've noticed this with some that I dated in the past, where it's like they were just stuck in their early teens. They're in their 20s, but the mentality and the things that they would do and the expectations they had was all like really early high school bullshit. And it's no wonder a lot of them just can't get their head out of their ass and be responsible, learn how to balance a damn checkbook, not get a credit card. No, because it's just all living in the moment and YOLO. That's a phrase that can just die already. So, this coming year, next week is New Year's. I've been thinking about this a lot. With my wife's car being paid off, I'm going to snowball that money into a couple of other bills that I just quickly want to get rid of. Dave Ramsey's not a complete idiot, but he still is stuck with a lot of ideas that are quickly turning into Stone Age material now. And thinking about Mike, I got to wondering, like, how much money could I actually save if I just didn't spend any? Now, the other good thing is, no car payment, cool. We also don't have a mortgage. So that means, aside from utilities and food, and keep in mind, I have probably well over a year's worth of food stashed away in the house. Not sure what phrase really fits that. I don't know if you noticed, but I tend to be a bit of a prepper. And with all the things that were going on since 2020, kind of kicked that up in gear. So I'm thinking could probably just save up a bunch of money within a year, because there's a lot of work that we want to do on the house, a lot of work that needs to be done on the house. And one thing I don't want to do is take out a loan. If you want to be poor, have a car payment. And that's been me since we moved here, since 2020. Like, the car payment's been my burden. And now with that gone, and if you want to be a slave, have a mortgage. Well, not a slave. And that phrase, there seems to be a lot of truth with that phrase. The only issue is, in this country, unless you somehow have free health care, you're still a slave. You're a slave to the job that you have that provides your health care, because it's the one thing you think about when you're like, I wish I could get rid of this piece of job. And you're like, oh yeah, I'll lose my health care coverage. And that's one thing I hear Canadians talk about is, oh yeah, when I was fed up with that job, I just left. And the first thought that Americans would have is, what about your health insurance? And it's like, they're covered. Like, they don't have to worry about that. If they're in a bad situation with their job, they don't like where they're working, they can just leave. There's no issue with that. And I had to acknowledge when I left my job at the hospital that the insurance that they were providing me, which I couldn't afford to use to begin with, was crap anyways. So I could either leave and just figure things out afterwards, which is exactly what I did. I didn't sign up for Cobra. You have any idea how much Cobra costs? Like whatever money you saved up to leave your job would go straight into Cobra. And again, you either didn't have or aren't making enough to use that insurance. The whole notion that the government, can force you to pay for health insurance of all things is completely freaking ridiculous. It's like what they argued with Social Security. We can do with it what we want because it's a tax. We can't force people to do anything unless it's a tax. Well, it's not a tax when you're forcing people to hand over your money to private corporations. So can they really force us to hand over money to private corporations? Sounds like no. So anyways, it seems like I should be able to get a lot accomplished this year just by really just not doing much, honestly. And I've done it before. I used to do these experiments years ago. I don't remember if I made videos on it or not. I think it was the beginning of my website, thecollapseexperiment.com, where I was growing my own food. I was mountain biking a lot. You know, it was trying to not spend a lot of money. Like the more food I could grow and eat, the better, because I wasn't spending money on food. I did this for a while. And I'd save up quite a bit of money. Of course, at the time it was going towards paying off debt. But the debt got paid off. And you learn quite a bit. And there were times where I used to wash my clothes in the tub, just so I kind of knew what it was like to not have a washing machine. And it was a very humbling experience. It's just not something, unless you watch that channel, what's her name, Gubba? I think it's Gubba. It's not Bug. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Gubba. Where she does a bunch of that stuff. Tries to do things without electricity and homesteading and taking care of a bunch of different animals and milking goats and stuff. You don't come across that too often with women these days. And when you do, it's really rare. My ex-wife would probably rather jump off a cliff than try to live a life like that. And there's a lot of women that would do that. And I gotta tell you, when it came to the hospital, the majority of them were like this. It's like they may take, for example, maybe a nurse goes on vacation like once a year. And most of the time they're not driving whatever it is they're going, they're flying out somewhere. But they've got to have the GPS navigation system. Because so-and-so also was talking about how they had a GPS navigation system. And it helped them out so much when they went on this trip. So then 3 or 4 other nurses have to go out and buy one of these damn things because so-and-so has one. And they just talked about how great it is. Well, I gotta have one too. And they're never gonna use the damn thing. I feel like that's most of the stuff that we cling on to in this society. Want it, gotta have it, it's a status symbol, doesn't do crap for me, makes me feel good for about 5 minutes. Somebody will break into my car and steal it, I'm a victim, oh, I get brownie points for that. Then they go out and buy another one. And then Mike is left holding the bag. Keep on typing.